She told me I was her first foreigner. I believed her. I gave her my heart, my trust, and my savings. What I didn't know was that I was her 15th. By the time I found out the truth, it was too late. I remember the exact moment she said it. We were sitting in that little cafe near Quiapo Church, the one with the cracked tiles and the fan that barely worked. Maritz held my hand across the table, her fingers so small against mine, and whispered, "David, you are my first foreigner. I never been with American before." Her eyes looked down, shy, like she was embarrassed to admit it. That's what got me. That shyness, that innocence I thought I saw. "Really?" I asked, squeezing her hand gently. "You sure about that?" "Yes, Po," she said, using that respectful Filipino tone that made my heart melt every time. "My friends, they always with foreigners. But not me. I wait for right person. I wait for you." God, what a fool I was. Sitting there in that sweltering Manila heat, feeling like I'd won the lottery. Here was this beautiful 22-year-old girl, telling me I was special. Me. David Turner, 57 years old, retired factory supervisor from Ohio, with gray hair and a gut that hadn't seen a gym in 20 years. "I'm honored," I told her, and I meant it. "I really am." She smiled then, that smile that could light up the darkest corner of my broken heart. 5 years since Mary passed, 5 years of eating frozen dinners and talking to the TV. 5 years of watching other couples at the grocery store and feeling that ache in my chest. But here, in this humid cafe in Manila, that ache was finally gone. "You make me feel safe," Marite said, still holding my hand. "Other men, they just want one thing. But you different, you good man. I can see in your eyes." I wanted to believe her so badly. No, I needed to believe her. Back home, women my age looked right through me. I was just another widowed retiree, invisible, forgotten. But Marite saw something in me. She made me feel young again, important again. "I care about you," I said, stroking her knuckles with my thumb. "I want to take care of you." "You already taking care of me," she whispered. "Just by being here, just by loving me." The word love hung in the air between us like incense. We'd been seeing each other for 3 weeks, but it felt like months. Maybe because I was so desperate for connection, so hungry for someone to need me again. Or maybe because she had this way of making every moment feel significant, charged with meaning. "Maritz," I started, then stopped. I wanted to tell her I loved her too, but something held me back. Some small voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my late wife Mary, warning me to slow down. "What, baby?" Maritz asked, tilting her head like a curious child. "Nothing," I said, pushing Mary's voice away. "I'm just happy. Really happy." She leaned across the table then and kissed me, soft and sweet, tasting like the mango shake she'd been drinking. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with what I thought was love but now realized was probably calculation. "I happy too," she said, "more happy than I ever been." As we walked out of that cafe hand in hand, I felt like I was walking into a new life. The loneliness that had eaten at me for 5 years was finally gone. I had someone who needed me, someone who thought I was special. Her first foreigner, her first love, she'd later claim. Looking back now, I can see how perfectly she played me from that very first moment, how she knew exactly what a lonely widower wanted to hear. But at the time, all I could see was her smile and all I could feel was hope. I need to tell you how this all started, how a sensible man like me ended up falling for the oldest trick in the book. After Mary died, I tried everything. Grief counseling, senior dating sites, even church socials. Nothing worked. I felt dead inside, going through the motions of living without really being alive. That's when I discovered those YouTube channels about American men living in Southeast Asia. Paradise Found, Living the Dream in the Philippines, Why I Left America for Good. I must have watched hundreds of videos. These guys, most of them older than me, talking about how respected they were, how young, beautiful women actually wanted to be with them. It sounded too good to be true, but the desperation in my heart made it sound like salvation. "You thinking about it, aren't you?" My neighbor Bob asked one evening as we stood on my front porch. "You got that look." "What look?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "The look of a man who's about to do something stupid," Bob said, taking a swig of his beer. "Those videos you've been watching, they're not telling you the whole story, Dave. Maybe not, I admitted. But what have I got to lose? I'm dying here, Bob. Slowly but surely dying. Bob was quiet for a long moment. Your money, for one thing. Your dignity, for another. But I'd already made up my mind. 3 weeks later, I was on a plane to Manila with 2 suitcases and more cash than I'd ever carried in my life. The plan was simple. Stay for a month, see the sights, maybe meet someone nice. No expectations, just an adventure. I met Marites on my 3rd night in the city. I'd wandered into this little bar in Malate, nothing fancy, just a place to have a beer and people watch. She was working as a waitress, wearing a simple blue dress that made her look younger than her 22 years. Most of the other girls were chatty, aggressive even, but Marites hung back. You want another beer, sir? She asked quietly, refilling my glass before I could answer. Thank you, I said, studying her face. She was pretty, sure, but it was more than that. There was something gentle about her, something that reminded me of Mary when we first met. You American? She asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. Sorry, I shouldn't ask personal questions. It's okay, I laughed. Yes, I'm American. From Ohio. You can ask me anything you want. She smiled then, just a little, and I felt something stir in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. I never been to America, she said. But I watch American movies. I like romantic movies. We talked for maybe 10 minutes before her supervisor called her away, but those 10 minutes changed everything. She wasn't like the other girls. She didn't ask for drinks or money. She just talked to me like I was a regular person, not a walking ATM. I came back the next night, and the night after that. Always sat at the same table, always asked for Marites to serve me. On the 4th night, she agreed to meet me for coffee after her shift. I don't usually do this, she said as we walked to the 24-hour cafe down the street. Meet customers outside work, I mean. Why are you making an exception for me? I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. She stopped walking and looked up at me with those big brown eyes. Because you seem lonely, she said simply. Like me. That's when I knew I was in trouble. Not because she was beautiful or young, but because she saw right through me to the broken man underneath. Or at least, that's what I thought at the time. Now I know she was just good at reading marks. The first time she asked for money, I almost said no. We'd been seeing each other for 2 weeks, meeting every few days for coffee or lunch. She always insisted on paying her share, even though I could see her counting coins from her small purse. David, she said one afternoon as we sat in Rizal Park, watching families feed the pigeons. I need to tell you something, but I'm embarrassed. My heart jumped. Was she going to confess she had feelings for me? Or maybe reveal some dark secret that would shatter my growing hopes? You can tell me anything, I said, taking her hand. She looked down at our joined hands, and I saw what looked like real tears forming in her eyes. My school fees are due next week, and I don't have enough money. I've been working extra shifts, but it's not enough. Relief washed over me. Money. That was all. How much do you need? No, she said quickly, pulling her hand away. I shouldn't have said anything. I don't want you to think I'm like other girls, only after money. How much, Marites? 20,000 pesos, she whispered. But I can't take money from you. It's not right. 20,000 pesos. About $400. Practically nothing to me, but probably a fortune to her. I saw the shame in her face, the way she wouldn't meet my eyes. This wasn't some practiced sob story. This was real desperation. I'll give it to you, I said. As a gift, no strings attached. No, David, I can't. Yes, you can, I interrupted. I want to help. That's what people do for each other, right? They help. She cried then, actually cried, and threw her arms around me right there in the park. Thank you, she sobbed into my shoulder. I pay you back, I promise. You don't have to pay me back, I said, stroking her hair. Just keep being yourself. That's payment enough. What an idiot I was. But at the time, her reaction seemed so genuine, so grateful. I felt like a knight in shining armor, rescuing the damsel in distress. It felt good to be needed again, to be someone's hero. The requests came more frequently after that. Medicine for her sick mother, groceries for her family, books for school. Never big amounts, always with that same shameful reluctance, that same grateful tears afterward. I told myself I was being generous, that this was what good men did for the women they cared about. But there were other things too. Things that bothered me more than the money requests. The way she'd disappear for hours without explanation. Family obligations, she'd say, or helping my cousin with something. Her phone was always face down when we were together, and she'd tense up whenever it buzzed. "Who keeps texting you?" I asked one evening as her phone lit up for the 5th time during dinner. "Just my friend," she said, not looking at the screen. "Girl drama, you know, not important. Everything okay?" "Yes, baby," she said, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "Nothing to worry about. I only worry about you now." I wanted to believe her. So I did. When doubt crept in, I pushed it away. When logic tried to intrude, I silenced it with memories of her smile, her laugh, the way she made me feel alive again. I was getting what I needed: companionship, affection, hope, so what did it matter if she got something too? "You're different from other foreigners," she told me one night, as we walked along Roxas Boulevard. "Most of them, they just want to show off their money, treat Filipino women like toys." "How would you know?" I asked, and immediately regretted the question. She stopped walking and looked at me with hurt in her eyes. "My friends tell me stories. Scary stories. But you're not like that. You're kind. You respect me." "I do respect you," I said, feeling guilty for questioning her. "That's why I trust you," she said, slipping her arm through mine. "That's why you're special to me." Special. The word I most needed to hear. I was special to someone again. Whatever doubts I had, whatever red flags my logical mind tried to wave, that one word silenced them all. I was special to Maritz, and that made everything else bearable. Looking back now, I can see how expertly she managed me. Every doubt was met with reassurance. Every question was answered with just enough truth mixed with misdirection. She knew exactly what buttons to push, exactly how to keep me hooked without spooking me completely. But at the time, all I could see was a young woman who needed me as much as I needed her. "I want you to meet my family," Maritz said one Sunday morning as we shared breakfast at a small carinderia near her apartment. "If that's okay with you." My heart nearly stopped. Meeting the family. That was serious. That was the next step toward something real, something permanent. "Are you sure?" I asked, trying not to sound too eager. "I mean, won't they think it's strange? Me being so much older and all?" "They will love you," she said confidently. "I told them about you already. How kind you are. How you help me with school. My mama, she want to meet the man who makes her daughter so happy." So the following Saturday I found myself on a jeepney heading to Quezon City, clutching a bag of gifts I'd bought at Robinson's Mall. Chocolates for her mother, toys for her younger brothers, a bottle of good whiskey for any men in the household. I was nervous as hell but also excited. This felt like validation, proof that what we had was real and serious. Her family lived in a small concrete house squeezed between identical structures in a crowded subdivision. Kids played in the narrow streets, and neighbors sat outside their doors watching the world go by. It was humble but clean, the kind of working-class neighborhood where people looked out for each other. "Mama," Maritz called out as we approached the house. "He's here." An older woman emerged from the doorway, smaller than her daughter but with the same warm smile. Behind her came 2 boys, maybe 8 and 10 years old, hiding behind their mother's dress. "Mama, this is David," Maritz said, switching to a mix of English and Tagalog. "David, my mother Rosa." "Mrs. Cruz," I said, offering my hand. "Thank you for welcoming me into your home." "Oh, call me Tita Rosa," she said, taking my hand in both of hers. "Welcome, welcome. Maritz tell us so much about you." The boys were introduced as June and Paulo, Maritz's younger brothers. They were shy at first but warmed up quickly when I pulled out the toys I'd brought. Soon they were showing me their collection of toy cars and teaching me Tagalog words that made them giggle when I mispronounced them. "You hungry?" Tita Rosa asked, already heading toward the small kitchen. "I cook adobo, your favorite food here in Philippines. Mama always cook when visitors come," Maritz explained, settling beside me on the plastic-covered sofa. "She want to make sure everyone eat good." The house was tiny, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living area that doubled as dining room. But it was filled with warmth and laughter. Family photos covered every available wall space, and the smell of garlic and soy sauce wafted from the kitchen. It felt more like home than my empty house in Ohio had felt in years. During dinner, they peppered me with questions about America, about my work, about my family. I told them about Mary, about my years at the factory, about how lonely I'd been since retirement. They listened with genuine interest, nodding and asking follow-up questions that showed they were really paying attention. "You miss your wife very much," Tita Rosa observed, refilling my plate without asking. "Must be hard, being alone so long." "It has been," I admitted. "But your daughter, she's helped me remember what it's like to be happy again." Maritz squeezed my hand under the table, and her mother beamed. "Maritz is good girl," Tita Rosa said. "She always help family, always work hard for school. Now she have good man to take care of her." After dinner, the boys dragged me outside to show me their fighting cocks, magnificent birds they kept in bamboo cages behind the house. As we stood there, admiring the roosters, I felt a contentment I hadn't experienced in years. This could be my family. These could be my people. "Uncle David," little Paolo said, tugging on my shirt, "you stay here Philippines forever?" "Maybe," I said, ruffling his hair. "Would you like that?" "Yes," both boys shouted in unison. "We teach you more Tagalog." When it was time to leave, Tita Rosa hugged me tightly and whispered, "You take care of my daughter, okay? She is my precious gift." "I will," I promised, and meant it with every fiber of my being. On the jeepney ride back to Manila, I felt like I was floating. Her family had accepted me completely, warmly, genuinely. The boys already called me Uncle David. Her mother treated me like a son. This wasn't some transaction or scam, this was real family connection. "They love you," Maritz said, leaning against my shoulder as the jeepney bounced along the potholed highway. "I love them too," I said. "They're wonderful people." "Now you understand why I work so hard," she said quietly. "Why I need to help them. They sacrifice so much for me to go to school." I pulled out my wallet and handed her 5,000 pesos before she could protest. "For your mama," I said, "to help with groceries or whatever she needs." Maritz tried to refuse, but I insisted. It felt good to be generous, to be the provider, to be needed by this warm, loving family. What I didn't realize was that I was being perfectly played, that every warm gesture and genuine smile was part of a well-rehearsed performance designed to extract maximum resources from the lonely foreigner. But in that moment, bouncing along in that crowded jeepney with Maritz's head on my shoulder, I felt like the luckiest man in the world. I had found not just a girlfriend but a family, or so I thought. I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there, but I was too blinded by what I thought was love to pay attention. The late-night disappearances became more frequent. The phone calls she'd take in hushed whispers, walking away from me to talk privately. The way she'd sometimes smell like different cologne when she came back from her family visits. "I have to work extra shift tonight," she told me one Thursday evening as we finished dinner at our usual spot. "Managers say they need someone to cover." "On a Thursday?" I asked. "Thursday nights were our nights. We'd established that routine weeks ago." "I know, baby, sorry," she said, reaching across to touch my hand. "But I need the money. You know how it is." I did know how it is, or thought I did. Money was tight for her. Every peso counted. I was already giving her regular allowances to help with school and family expenses, but she was proud. She insisted on working, on contributing. "Maybe I could just give you what you'd make tonight," I suggested. "Then we could spend the evening together." Something flickered across her face, annoyance, maybe, or calculation. But it was gone so quickly I thought I'd imagined it. "No, David," she said firmly. "I told you before I don't want to be like other girls. I want to work for my money." I admired her independence, even as it frustrated me. So I kissed her goodbye and went back to my hotel room alone, trying not to think about what she might really be doing. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Around 10 p.m., restlessness got the better of me. I decided to surprise her at the bar, maybe bring her some food for her break. It was only a 10-minute walk from my hotel. The bar was crowded for a Thursday night, full of foreigners and locals mixed together in the dim lighting. I looked around for Maritz but didn't see her at first. Then I spotted her in a corner booth, and my world tilted sideways. She was sitting close to another foreigner, a man about my age with silver hair and an expensive watch. Her hand was on his arm, and she was laughing at something he'd said. Not the polite laugh she gave customers, but the real laugh I thought was reserved for me. the intimate laugh of a woman with her lover. I stood frozen by the entrance, watching as she leaned even closer to whisper something in his ear. He smiled and whispered something back, and she giggled like a schoolgirl. My schoolgirl. My special someone. I must have made a sound because she looked up and saw me. The color drained from her face, and she immediately pulled her hand away from the man's arm. "David," she called out, waving me over with forced cheerfulness. "What are you doing here?" I walked over on unsteady legs, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. "I thought I'd surprise you," I said, my voice sounding strange even to myself. "Bring you some food." "Oh, that's so sweet," she said, but her eyes were darting between me and the other man. "This is Mr. Heinrich. He's from Germany." "Heinrich, this is David, my friend. Friend. Not boyfriend. Not the man she'd told she loved. Friend." Heinrich nodded politely and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, David. Maritz was just telling me about her studies." "Her studies," I repeated numbly, shaking his hand. "Yes. I'm helping her with some advice," Heinrich continued, "about her business course. I have experience in that field." The lies came so easily from both of them. I could see it in their faces, the practiced smoothness of people who'd done this before. How many times had they met like this? How many other advisors did she have? "Well, I should let you get back to work," I said, setting the food container on the table. "I know you're very busy tonight." "David, wait," she started, but I was already walking away. She caught up with me outside, grabbing my arm as I headed toward the street. "It's not what you think," she said breathlessly. "Heinrich, he just lonely man, like you were when we first met. I just being friendly, being professional." "Professional," I said. "Is that what you call it?" "Baby, please," she said, and now there were tears in her eyes. "You know you're the only one I love. You know you're special to me." "Am I?" I asked, turning to face her, because it looked like Heinrich might be pretty special too. "No," she said, grabbing both my hands now. "Heinrich is nothing to me. Customer only. You are my heart. You are my everything." The tears looked real. The desperation in her voice sounded genuine. And God help me, I wanted to believe her so badly that I almost did. "Then why did you introduce me as your friend?" I asked. She looked down, ashamed. Because people here, they talk. If they know I have boyfriend, they might think things. Bad things. I just trying to protect us." It was a reasonable explanation. It even made sense, given the culture and the circumstances. But something in my gut told me it was bullshit, just another lie in what was probably an endless string of lies. "Maritz," I said quietly, "I need you to be completely honest with me. Are you seeing other men?" "No," she said immediately. "Never. Only you. Are you sure?" "I swear," she said, crossing herself. "On my mother's life, I swear, only you." I looked into her eyes, those beautiful brown eyes that had captivated me from the first moment, and I made a choice. I chose to believe her. I chose love over logic, hope over evidence. "Okay," I said. "I believe you." The relief on her face was overwhelming. She threw her arms around me and kissed me right there on the street, not caring who saw. "I love you so much," she whispered against my lips. "You are my first love, my only love." As we walked back to my hotel together, her small hand in mine, I told myself I'd made the right choice. Everyone deserved the benefit of the doubt. Everyone deserved a second chance. But deep down, in a place I wasn't ready to acknowledge, I knew I was lying to myself as much as she was lying to me. The truth was coming. Whether I was ready for it or not. 3 weeks after the Heinrich incident, I thought we were back on solid ground. Maritz had been extra attentive, extra affectionate. She'd even started talking about the future, about maybe visiting America someday, about how her family already considered me part of their clan. I let myself believe the worst was behind us. I was an idiot. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Maritz had spent the night at my hotel room, something that was becoming more frequent. She was in the shower, humming some Filipino pop song, when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It buzzed again, and again. I wasn't trying to snoop. The phone was right there, lighting up with each message, and the name on the screen caught my eye. Heinrich Baby. Then another message from Tom Darling. Then one from Mark Sweetheart. My blood turned to ice. With shaking hands, I picked up the phone. It wasn't locked. She'd been texting while lying next to me just minutes before. The messages were all there, laid out like evidence in a trial that would convict me of being the world's biggest fool. Heinrich baby. Miss you already, my princess. When can we meet again? Tom darling, the money you asked for is ready. Same time tomorrow? Mark sweetheart. You looked beautiful last night, baby. I can't stop thinking about you. There were more. So many more. I scrolled through weeks of conversations, my heart breaking with each sweet lie, each declaration of love, each promise that he was the only one for her. The names kept coming. Robert, James, Carlos, Kim, Ahmed, all with pet names, all with the same affectionate messages, all believing they were special. I counted them as I scrolled, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. 14 different men, 14 different foreigners, all getting the same treatment, all hearing the same lies I'd been hearing. All of them thinking they were her first, her only, her special one. The shower was still running. I could still hear her humming. She had no idea her entire world of lies was crashing down around her. I kept reading, unable to stop myself. The messages revealed a system, a rotation. Monday nights with Heinrich, Tuesday afternoons with Tom, weekend trips with Mark, and me, faithful David, getting the weeknight slots when the bigger fish weren't available. I was just another John in her little black book, another lonely foreigner sending money to his special princess. The worst part was reading my own declarations of love repeated word for word to other men. You are my first foreigner. She'd told that lie to at least 8 different guys. I never felt this way before. Copied and pasted to half the contacts in her phone. The water shut off. She'd be out any minute, ready to climb back into bed with me and probably ask for money for her school fees or her sick mother or whatever sob story was scheduled for today. I set the phone back exactly where I'd found it and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the bathroom door. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel and smiling that radiant smile that had captured my heart, I felt nothing but nausea. Good morning, baby, she said, coming over to kiss me. You look tired. You okay? I pulled away before her lips could touch mine. I need to ask you something. Something in my tone made her stop, made her study my face more carefully. Okay, she said slowly. What is it? How many other men are you seeing? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, hurt, and finally, calculation. What you mean? She asked, sitting on the bed beside me but keeping distance between us. You know you're the only one. Am I? I asked, picking up her phone and holding it out to her. Because Heinrich baby seems to think otherwise. And Tom darling. And Mark sweetheart. The blood drained from her face. For the first time since I'd known her, she was speechless. David, I can explain. 14, I said quietly. I counted 14 different men. All of them getting the same messages I get. All of them hearing the same lies. She started crying then, but they were different tears this time. Not the soft, pretty tears of a woman in love, but the desperate tears of someone caught in a trap of their own making. It's not what you think, she said, reaching for me. Those men, they mean nothing to me. You are the one I love. Stop, I said, standing up and moving away from her. Just stop lying to me. I'm not lying. You are my first foreigner, I recited, my voice deadly calm. I never been with American before. You said those exact words to me. Did you say them to Heinrich too? To Tom? To Mark? She couldn't meet my eyes. Her silence was answer enough. You told me I was special, I continued. You said I was different from other foreigners, but I'm not different at all, am I? I'm just another customer in your rotation. David, please. How long? I asked. How long have you been playing this game with me? It's not a game, she whispered. I do care about you. How long, Maritz? She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and when she looked at me, I saw something I'd never seen before, the real her. Not the sweet, innocent girl I'd fallen in love with, but the calculating woman who'd been managing multiple relationships for God knows how long. Since the beginning, she said quietly. The honesty was like a punch to the gut. At least she'd finally stopped lying. Since the very first night we met? She nodded, unable to speak. I sat down heavily in the chair by the window, suddenly feeling every one of my 57 years. So none of it was real. Not the shyness, not the innocence, not the love. The feelings were real, she said desperately. Maybe it started as business, but I did develop feelings for you. Feelings, I repeated. The same feelings you developed for Heinrich and Tom and Mark? She opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. We both knew the truth now. I looked at this woman I thought I loved, this stranger who'd been sharing my bed and my heart and my bank account, and felt nothing but emptiness. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that I couldn't even feel angry. I just felt hollow. Get dressed, I said quietly, and get out. David, please, we can work this out. Get dressed and get out. She must have heard something final in my voice because she stopped pleading. She gathered her clothes and dressed quickly, efficiently, like someone who'd done this before, which, I realized, she probably had. At the door, she turned back one last time. I'm sorry, she said, and for just a moment, I thought I heard genuine regret in her voice. So am I replied. After she left, I sat in that hotel room for hours, staring at nothing, feeling nothing. The woman I'd loved didn't exist. She never had. I'd been in love with a performance, a carefully crafted illusion designed to extract money from lonely men like me. I wasn't her first foreigner. I wasn't even her 15th. I was just another mark in a long line of marks, another fool who'd believed he was special when he was really just convenient. The worst part wasn't the money I'd lost or even the betrayal of trust. The worst part was that I'd allowed myself to hope again, to believe in love again, and now that hope was dead. Deader than it had been, even after Mary passed, because at least that love had been real. This time, the hope I'd lost had been built on nothing but lies. I should have cut all contact right then, should have blocked her number, checked out of the hotel, and caught the next flight back to Ohio. But I didn't. Because even knowing the truth, even seeing the evidence with my own eyes, some pathetic part of me still hoped there might be an explanation that could make it all okay. She called me that evening, crying so hard she could barely speak. David, please, you have to listen to me. She sobbed into the phone. I can explain everything. Please give me one chance. There's nothing to explain, I said, but I didn't hang up. I should have, but I didn't. Yes, there is, she insisted. Meet me tomorrow, one time. Let me show you something. Show me what? Just meet me, please, at our cafe, the one where we had our first date. Against every rational thought in my head, I agreed. Maybe I was hoping for closure. Maybe I was hoping for a miracle. Or maybe I was just too pathetically in love to let go completely. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at our usual table, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and she dressed simply, almost childishly, in a plain white t-shirt and jeans. Thank you for coming, she said quietly as I sat down across from her. Talk, I said. You have 10 minutes. She took a shaky breath and pulled out a small notebook from her purse. This is my diary, she said, sliding it across the table. Read page 23. I opened it reluctantly. Her handwriting was small and careful, mostly in English with some Tagalog mixed in. Page 23 was dated about a month after we'd first met. I think I am falling in love with David, the entry read. This is dangerous for me. He is different from the others. He makes me feel like I could be a good person again. But I am trapped in this life. I don't know how to tell him the truth without losing him. I looked up at her. You wrote this knowing I might read it someday. No, she said, shaking her head. I write in this diary every night. It's private. I never show anyone. I flipped through more pages. There were entries about her family, about school, about work, and there were entries about other men too. Heinrich, Tom, Mark. But the tone was different when she wrote about them. Clinical, businesslike. When she wrote about me, there was something else. Something that looked almost like real emotion. David, she said, reaching across to touch my hand. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you. But what I felt for you, that was real. How can I believe anything you say now? Because I'm here, she said simply. Because I could have just disappeared, moved on to the next man, but I'm here trying to save what we have. What we have is built on lies. The beginning was lies, she admitted. But somewhere along the way, it became real for me. You became real. I wanted to believe her. God, how badly I wanted to believe her. But the evidence was overwhelming. 14 other men. 14 sets of the same lies. What about Heinrich? I asked. What about Tom and Mark and all the rest? She looked down at her hands. I will end it with all of them. Today. Right now if you want. I will send messages breaking up with all of them. And then what? You think we can just go back to how things were? No, she said. I think we can start over. For real this time. No lies, no other men. Just you and me. She pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. Look, she said, showing me the screen. I'm sending messages to all of them right now. I cannot see you anymore. I have found someone I want to be with only. I watched her send message after message, breaking up with her entire stable of foreign boyfriends in real time. Part of me was amazed at the performance. Part of me wondered if this was just another manipulation. There, she said when she'd finished. All done. Now it's just you. Just me and the next lonely foreigner who walks into that bar next week. No, she said firmly. I'm quitting the bar. I already told my manager yesterday. I want to focus on school, on being a better person, on being worthy of you. The tears in her eyes looked real. The tremor in her voice sounded genuine. But I'd thought everything about her was real for months, and look how that had turned out. Marie-Thérèse, I said gently. Even if I believed you, even if I thought you could change, how could I ever trust you again? How could I ever look at you without wondering who else you're seeing? You couldn't, she admitted. Not right away. But trust can be built again. Love can be rebuilt, if you give me the chance. Why should I? Because what we had was good, she said. Because I made you happy, and you made me happy. Because maybe we both deserve a second chance. She was right about one thing: she had made me happy. Happier than I'd been in years. But was that happiness worth the risk of being fooled again? Was the possibility of real love worth gambling what was left of my heart and dignity? I need time to think, I said finally. How much time? I don't know. Maybe a lot. Maybe forever, she nodded sadly. I understand. But David, please remember, everyone makes mistakes. Everyone deserves forgiveness. Even me. As I walked away from that cafe, leaving her sitting alone at our table, I felt more confused than ever. Part of me wanted to turn around, take her in my arms, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But another part of me, the part that sounded like my late wife Mary, whispered that some mistakes were too big to forgive, some trust too broken to repair. The question was, which part of me was right? I gave her 3 days. 3 days of agonizing over whether to give her another chance or walk away for good. 3 days of replaying every moment we'd shared, trying to separate the real from the performance. 3 days of checking my phone constantly, hoping and dreading that she might call. She didn't call. Somehow, that made the decision easier. On Thursday morning, I called her. David, she answered on the first ring, hope evident in her voice. I want to see you, I said, one last time. Okay, she said quietly. Where? Rizal Park. Where you first asked me for money. She was waiting for me on the same bench where she'd cried about her school fees all those weeks ago. She looked older somehow, tired in a way that makeup couldn't hide. When she saw me approaching, she stood up with a nervous smile. Hi, she said softly. Hi. We sat down together, maintaining the distance of strangers. Around us, families were enjoying the afternoon sun, children playing while their parents watched. It was peaceful, normal, everything our relationship had never been. I've made my decision, I said without preamble. She turned to face me, her eyes searching mine for some hint of hope. I can't do this anymore, I continued. I can't be with someone I don't trust. Her face crumpled, but she didn't cry. Maybe she'd used up all her tears, or maybe she'd expected this outcome. I understand, she whispered. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope. There's 10,000 pesos in here, I said, placing it on the bench between us. Consider it severance pay. She stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. I don't want your money anymore. Take it anyway. I don't want to owe you anything, and I don't want you to owe me anything. She picked up the envelope with reluctant hands. What will you do now? Go home, I said. Back to Ohio. Back to my quiet, lonely, honest life. And me? I looked at her, really looked at her for what I knew would be the last time. She was still beautiful, still young, still capable of making some other man believe he was special. But I also saw something else now. The hardness around her eyes, the practiced way she held herself, the calculation that never fully disappeared. That's not my problem anymore, I said. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Maybe because it was the first completely honest thing I'd said to her in weeks. I'm sorry, she said, for everything. I know that doesn't mean much now, but I am sorry. So am I replied. Sorry I let myself believe in something that was never real. I stood up to leave, and she caught my hand. David, wait, can I ask you something? I paused, not sitting back down but not pulling away either. What? If I had told you the truth from the beginning about the other men, about what I was doing, would you have stayed? It was a fair question, and she deserved an honest answer. No, I said, I wouldn't have. I was looking for love, not a business arrangement. She nodded and released my hand. That's what I thought, that's why I lied, and that's why this could never work. I walked away then, leaving her sitting on that bench with her envelope of money and whatever regrets she might have. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. At the hotel, I packed my bags and changed my flight to leave the next morning. I had no reason to stay in Manila anymore, no reason to explore a country that would forever remind me of the biggest mistake of my life. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the sounds of the city outside my window, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. The constant anxiety of wondering who she was with, what she was doing, whether she was telling the truth, all of that was gone. I was free of the lies, free of the manipulation, free of the performance that had masqueraded as love. It hurt, sure. My heart was broken in a way that felt different from losing Mary. When Mary died, I lost something real and precious. When I lost Maritz, I discovered I'd never had anything real to lose in the first place. That kind of betrayal left a different kind of wound, one that felt more like shame than grief. But underneath the pain and shame there was something else: clarity. For the first time in months I could see clearly. I could think clearly. I was no longer under the spell of a beautiful young woman's lies, and that clarity told me I was doing the right thing. Finally. The flight back to Ohio gave me 14 hours to think, 14 hours to piece together how a reasonably intelligent man could be fooled so completely. By the time we touched down in Cleveland, I thought I understood what had happened to me. More importantly, I understood my role in it. The truth was uncomfortable. I hadn't been an innocent victim. I'd been a willing participant in my own deception. Sitting in my empty house in Ohio, surrounded by the same furniture and the same memories I'd tried to escape, I forced myself to replay the entire relationship with brutal honesty. Not the version I'd told myself while it was happening, but the real version, the one where I ignored red flags because I didn't want to see them, the money requests that came too frequently and too easily, the way she'd always change the subject when I asked about her past, the convenient family emergencies that always required cash, the phone calls she'd take in private, the nights she couldn't see me because of mysterious obligations. I'd seen all of it, every single warning sign. But I'd explained it away because I needed to believe I was special, needed to believe someone could love me again. You stupid old fool, I said aloud to my empty living room. You saw exactly what you wanted to see. That was the hardest truth to swallow. Maritz had lied to me, yes, but I'd lied to myself just as much. I'd convinced myself that a beautiful 22-year-old would fall in love with a gray-haired widower old enough to be her father. I'd convinced myself that age and money didn't matter, that what we had was pure and real and special. But love isn't blind. Desperation is blind. Love would have asked harder questions. Love would have demanded honesty. What I'd felt was desperation masquerading as love, and desperation will believe any lie that sounds like hope. I thought about all those YouTube videos that had inspired my trip, all those men talking about finding paradise in Southeast Asia. How many of them were lying to themselves the same way I had? How many were paying for affection and calling it love? How many were too proud or too ashamed to admit they'd been taken for a ride? The money hurt. I'd given Maritz probably $15,000 over the months we were together. But the money wasn't really the point. The point was that I'd abandoned my dignity, my common sense, and my self-respect for the illusion of being wanted. I'd been so hungry for connection, so desperate to feel relevant again, that I'd ignored every instinct telling me something was wrong. I'd silenced the voice in my head that sounded like Mary, the voice that would have protected me if I'd listened to it. What would Mary think of you now? I asked myself, and the answer was devastating. She'd be disappointed. Not angry, not hurt, but disappointed that I'd valued myself so little that I'd accept fake love over no love at all. She'd be sad that I'd forgotten the difference between being loved and being useful. But as painful as that realization was, it was also liberating. Because once you admit you've been a fool, you can stop being one. Once you recognize your own role in your deception, you can make sure it doesn't happen again. I wasn't the first lonely man to be taken advantage of by someone younger and prettier and hungrier. I wouldn't be the last. But I'd learned something valuable from the experience. Self-respect isn't something you can buy or borrow or steal. It's something you either have or you don't, and if you don't have it, all the money and affection in the world won't help you. Over the following weeks, I started putting my life back together. Not the fantasy life I'd imagined in Manila, but my real life. I joined a grief support group, started volunteering at the local food bank, even went on a few coffee dates with age-appropriate women from my church. None of them made my heart race the way Marit's had. None of them made me feel young and vital and special, but they were real. Their interest in me was genuine, based on who I actually was rather than what I could provide. And slowly, I began to remember what real connection felt like. I also started calling Bob more often, started accepting invitations to neighborhood barbecues, started being a friend instead of just a lonely widower. I discovered that I didn't need someone to complete me. I just needed to stop feeling sorry for myself and start living again. The shame of what happened in Manila never fully went away. Sometimes I'd catch myself remembering Marit's laugh or the way she'd hold my hand, and I'd feel that familiar ache of loss. But then I'd remember the 14 other men, the calculated lies, the performance that had fooled me so completely, and the ache would transform into something healthier, wisdom. I'd learned the most expensive lesson of my life, but I had learned it. I knew now that love can't be bought, that desperation makes terrible decisions, and that self-respect is the foundation of any real relationship. Most importantly, I'd learned that being alone was better than being with someone who didn't really see you, didn't really know you, didn't really care about anything but what you could give them. I was alone again, but this time by choice, and that made all the difference. 6 months after returning from Manila, I got an unexpected message on Facebook. It was from Marit's. "Hi David," it read. "I hope you are well. I wanted to tell you that I am engaged now to a Filipino man from my hometown. We are planning to marry next year. I wanted to say thank you for teaching me what real love should look like. I am sorry for how I treated you. You deserved better." I stared at that message for a long time before responding. "Congratulations," I wrote back. "I'm happy you found someone who makes you happy. Take care of yourself." That was it. No anger, no bitterness, no desire for revenge or explanation. Just a simple wish for her happiness and a recognition that we were both different people now than we'd been in those complicated months in Manila. I meant it too. I did hope she'd found real love, hope she'd learned from our experience the same way I had. Maybe the man she was marrying would see past the performance to the real person underneath. Maybe she'd discovered that genuine connection was worth more than financial security. Or maybe not. Maybe she was just moving on to the next phase of her life, the next strategy for survival. Either way, it wasn't my concern anymore. I'd found my own closure in the months since returning home. Not the dramatic movie-style closure where everything gets resolved and explained, but the quiet kind that comes from accepting what happened and choosing to move forward anyway. I was dating someone now, Helen, a widow from my church who'd lost her husband around the same time I'd lost Mary. She was 55, had gray streaks in her brown hair, and laughed too loud at movies. She also had 3 grown children who called regularly, a small garden she tended with obsessive care, and a way of looking at me that said she saw exactly who I was and liked what she saw. We'd been taking things slowly, having coffee after church services, going to matinee movies, sharing quiet dinners at family restaurants. There was no drama, no urgent passion, no desperate need to possess or be possessed. Just 2 people who'd been through loss and come out the other side, finding comfort in each other's company. "You're different than I thought you'd be," Helen told me one evening as we sat on her front porch watching the sunset. "Different how?" "More careful," she said. "Like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop." She wasn't wrong. I was more careful now, more guarded. The experience with Marit's had taught me that trust was something to be earned slowly, not given freely to anyone who smiled and said the right words. "Bad experience," I said simply. "Want to talk about it?" I considered telling her the whole story, the trip to Manila, the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation, but I realized I didn't need to. That story belonged to the past, to a version of myself I was still learning to forgive. "Maybe someday," I said. "But not tonight." Helen nodded and took my hand. Her fingers were warm and calloused from gardening, Nothing like Maritz's small, soft hands. But they were real. They belonged to someone who'd earned the right to hold them. As we sat there in comfortable silence, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this porch, this moment, this quietly contented life. It hadn't been the adventure I'd planned when I'd boarded that plane to Manila. It hadn't given me the passionate second chance at love I'd dreamed about. But it had given me something maybe more valuable. The knowledge that I could survive being fooled, being betrayed, being made a fool of, and still come out the other side with my dignity intact. I'd learned that wisdom sometimes comes disguised as heartbreak, and that the most important relationship you can have is the one with yourself. I wasn't the same man who'd believed he was Maritz's first foreigner. That man had been desperate, lonely, willing to accept any lie that made him feel special. This man, the one sitting on Helen's porch, holding her weathered hand, was more careful but also more honest, more guarded but also more genuine. I'd gone to the Philippines looking for love. What I'd found instead was myself, not the fantasy version I'd wanted to be, but the real version, with all its flaws and needs and capacity for both foolishness and growth. And in the end, that turned out to be exactly what I needed to find. The sun set behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Helen squeezed my hand gently. "Beautiful evening," she said. "Yes," I agreed, looking at her instead of the sunset. "It really is." I was home. Finally, truly home. Not in a place, but in my own skin, in my own life, in my own hard-earned understanding of what real love actually looked like. I'd been Maritz's 15th foreigner, but I was Helen's first David. And after everything I'd been through, that felt like the most beautiful truth of all.